My name is Clara, and what I'm about to tell you is not a story I ever planned to share. When I was 17, my parents handed me a garbage bag with my clothes inside, unlocked the front door, and told me I had 1 hour to figure out where I was going. Not because I was dangerous, not because I had done something unforgivable. They did it because I refused to lie for my father in front of his church. 1 hour, a garbage bag, 17 years old. I never walked back through that door, but 15 years later, on a Tuesday morning in March, I woke up to 22 missed calls and a voicemail that started with my mother's voice saying, "Baby, we need you." Not because they missed me, not because they had changed. They needed me because they had run out of everyone else to destroy. Let me take you back to the beginning. It was January, the kind of cold that makes Chicago feel personal, like the city itself has decided to punish you. I was 17 and a junior in high school, and my father was a deacon at our church. He was also, I had recently discovered, skimming money from the building fund. Small amounts at first, then larger ones. I found out by accident I had grabbed his coat to bring him his keys, and a deposit slip fell out, the numbers not matching anything that made sense for our household income. I didn't confront him. I was 17 and he was 6'2", and the kind of man who believed raising his voice counted as a reasonable argument. But I also couldn't lie. The church elders called a meeting. Someone else had noticed the discrepancies. They asked my father directly, in front of the congregation's leadership, whether he had any knowledge of missing funds. He looked at me. I looked back at him. He expected me to speak up and say I had seen nothing unusual, that my father was a good man, that the numbers must be someone else's error. I said nothing. I just looked at the table. That was enough. He knew what my silence meant. And my mother, who had spent 20 years making herself smaller so my father could feel larger, chose him. She always chose him. I had known that since I was 9 years old, and she watched him throw my science project in the trash because I got a B instead of an A, and she said nothing, did nothing, just quietly made dinner and pretended the evening had been ordinary. The night of the meeting, they came home before I did. By the time I got in from a friend's house, my mother had already packed my things. She had used a black garbage bag, not a suitcase, not a box, a garbage bag, which I understood was intentional. My father sat in his chair and did not look up from the television. My mother stood in the hallway with her arms crossed and told me I had an hour to call someone to pick me up, or I would be standing outside in January because she was locking the door at 9. I called my best friend's mother, a woman named Ruth, who had fed me dinner more times than I could count, and who arrived in 11 minutes, with her coat still half-buttoned. She did not ask many questions that night. She just put the garbage bag in her trunk, told me to get in, and turned the heat up. That was the last time I stood inside that house. Ruth's family let me stay through the rest of high school. I got a part-time job at a diner, saved every dollar I could, applied to every scholarship I could find, and enrolled at the University of Illinois on a financial aid package that required me to work 20 hours a week my entire freshman year. I graduated in 3.5 years. I went straight into a paralegal program because I had spent enough of my life understanding that the people with legal knowledge were the ones who didn't get trampled. By 28, I was working at a mid-sized firm in Seattle, managing case files and building a reputation for being the person attorneys called when something needed to be done right the first time. I had an apartment with real furniture I had bought myself, a cat named Douglas, and a quiet life that I had constructed from scratch with my own hands. I had not spoken to my parents in 15 years. I had not attended my younger brother Marcus's high school graduation, or his wedding, or the birth of his son, because every event came with the condition that my parents would also be there, and I was expected to perform the role of the daughter who had simply been going through a phase, who was over it now, who understood that family was family. I was not over it, and I was not performing. So when I woke up that Tuesday in March to 22 missed calls, my first thought was that someone had died. I sat up in bed with Douglas walking across my legs, and I scrolled through the notifications. 12 calls from a number I didn't recognize. 7 from my brother Marcus. 3 from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in a decade. And 2 from my mother's number, which I had never deleted, but had never called. I sat there for a long time. Then I pressed play on Marcus's voicemail. His voice was tight, controlled the way it got when he was trying not to show that he was scared. "Clara, I know it's been a while. I know you have every reason not to pick up, but Mom and Dad are in serious trouble, and I don't know what else to do. Dad's sick. The hospital bills are bad. They're losing the house. Clara, Please call me back. I set my phone down on the nightstand. Douglas headbutted my hand. I looked out the window at the Seattle skyline, beginning to pale in early morning light, and I felt something I had not expected to feel, which was nothing. Not grief, not rage, not guilt. Just a flat, quiet nothing. The way you feel when you've already done all the feeling a situation deserves, and there is simply nothing left. I got up, made coffee, fed Douglas, and went to work. By Thursday, I had called Marcus back. We met on a video call because he was still in Chicago, and I had no intention of flying back there for this conversation. He looked older. His son was 3 now, a little boy I had never met, and for a moment that landed somewhere in my chest in a way I hadn't anticipated. Marcus got to the point quickly, because Marcus had always been practical. Our father had been diagnosed with a heart condition 2 years earlier, and had refused to modify his diet or lifestyle because, as Marcus put it with visible exhaustion, he doesn't think the rules apply to him. The medical bills had compounded. Our mother had been managing the finances alone, because our father considered it beneath him to look at numbers, and she had been quietly borrowing against their home equity to cover the gaps. The house was now significantly underwater. They needed, Marcus said, looking at me steadily through the screen, financial help. Consistent financial help. Monthly. I let him finish. Then I said, calmly, that I was not going to do that. Marcus looked at the table for a moment. Then he said, Clara, they're still our parents. I told him I remembered exactly what kind of parents they were. I told him I remembered the garbage bag. He said that was 15 years ago, that people change, that Dad had been humbled by the illness. I told him that I hoped for their sake that was true, and that I wished them both good health, genuinely, but that I was not in a position to financially support the people who had put me out at 17 for the crime of not lying on their behalf. Marcus nodded slowly. He said he understood. We ended the call. I thought that was the conversation. I thought Marcus had accepted it. I was wrong. The following Monday, my colleague Jamie knocked on my office doorframe, with an expression I recognized immediately, the careful blankness of someone about to deliver bad news they weren't sure how to frame. She said she thought I should see something, held out her phone, and I took it. It was a Facebook post. My mother had written it, but the account wasn't hers. It was a shared community group for the Chicago neighborhood where I had grown up, a group with several thousand members. The post said, Our daughter abandoned us in our time of greatest need. Her father is sick, and she refuses to help. We gave her everything, and this is what we receive in return. Please keep our family in your prayers. There were 412 comments. Most of them were supportive of my parents. Several of them had tagged various accounts trying to find me. Someone had found my LinkedIn and posted the link. The comments beneath that were along the lines of, Look how well she's done for herself and she can't help her own sick father. Shameful. I handed Jamie her phone and told her I was stepping out for 10 minutes. I went to the stairwell, sat down on the concrete step and breathed. This was what they had always done. Not confrontation, but performance. Not conversation, but audience. My father had done it at church for 30 years. My mother had learned from watching him. They did not argue privately. They produced witnesses. I went back to my office and called Marcus. He picked up on the second ring, and before I could say anything he said, I told them not to. Clara, I told them this was a bad idea. I believed him. Marcus had never been strategic the way our parents were. He was just caught in the middle of something he hadn't built and didn't know how to escape. I told him that if the post wasn't taken down within 24 hours, I would be posting my own account of events. He said he would try. The post came down 18 hours later. I gave it a week. Then my father called me himself. I saw the number, the same one that had been in my phone for 15 years. Never called, never deleted. And I picked up, because I think some part of me needed to hear whether Marcus had been right, whether illness had changed him, whether the version of my father who put his coat on and went to church and said bless you to strangers had finally become the version he always performed in public. His voice was rougher than I remembered. There was something labored in his breathing. But the first words out of his mouth were, You think you're too good for us now. Not a question. A statement. The same register he had used my entire childhood. The register that meant I was being judged and had already been found guilty. He said I had embarrassed him. He said I had chosen strangers over my own blood. He said everything I had accomplished was built on the foundation they had given me, and I owed them for that. His voice got louder as he went, and somewhere near the end, There was a wet cough that sounded painful, and even then, hearing him sick and angry and scared, I did not feel guilty. I felt tired. I said, "You put me out with a garbage bag at 17 in January because I wouldn't cover for you stealing from a church. I don't owe you anything." Silence. Then he hung up. 45 minutes later, I received a text from a number I didn't know. It said, "You ungrateful brat. Your father is a sick man and you're going to be sorry for this." I screenshotted it, saved it to a folder I had already started, and went back to work. What came next, I should have anticipated. I had worked in a law firm long enough to know that people who feel cornered will reach for whatever lever is in their reach. I just hadn't expected them to reach quite so far. 3 weeks after the phone call, I got an email from one of the senior attorneys at my firm. Her name is Diane, and she was not warm about it. She said she had received several messages from anonymous accounts making allegations about my professional conduct, specifically that I had a history of misappropriating client funds and that I had stolen money from my own family to fund my education. She said she wasn't inclined to believe it, but that given the volume of messages and the specificity of the claims, she needed me to come in and discuss it. I sat in that meeting and I did not panic, which surprised me. I laid out everything: the garbage bag, the deposit slip, the church meeting, the Facebook post, the text from the unknown number. I had kept records of all of it. Diane listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment, and then she said, "Okay, we'll handle this on our end. You document everything going forward." The accounts were eventually traced back to an IP address registered to my parents' home address. Marcus confirmed this when I called him. His voice hollowed out in a way that told me he was only now understanding the full shape of what his parents were. That was the moment I decided I was done being quiet. I had spent 15 years living a life that was deliberately small, deliberately contained, so that it wouldn't attract their attention. I had not posted publicly about my career. I had not mentioned Seattle. I had not built any digital trail that would make me easy to find. And they had found me anyway, through Marcus probably, or through someone who knew someone, and now they had brought the fight to my professional life, which was the one thing I had built entirely without them. I wrote a post. I did not write it angry. I wrote it the way I had learned to write legal documents, which is precisely and without embellishment. I said, 15 years ago, my parents put me out of their home at 17 with a garbage bag because I refused to lie to protect my father from consequences he had earned. I built my life without them. They have recently contacted my employer with fabricated allegations in an attempt to pressure me into financially supporting them. I am sharing this because I believe in accountability and because I am not ashamed of anything I have done. I included the screenshots of the Facebook post, the unknown number text, and the email to Diane. By morning, it had been shared 1,400 times. The comments were not what my mother had received in that neighborhood group. They were from people who recognized the pattern, the church community cover-up, the garbage bag detail, the professional sabotage. Several people tagged legal aid organizations in Illinois. Someone who identified themselves as a family law attorney commented that what my parents had done with the employer emails potentially constituted defamation and tortious interference. 2 journalists reached out. I responded to neither, but I noted both. Marcus called me the evening the post went up. He was not angry. He sounded like someone who had been holding a very heavy thing for a very long time and had finally been allowed to put it down. He said, "Mom is saying you've destroyed the family." I said, "They made those choices, Marcus. Every single one of them." He was quiet. Then he said, "I know." That was the longest conversation we had had in 15 years. We stayed on the phone for an hour and a half. He told me things I hadn't known: that my father had been borrowing money from Marcus for 4 years, that my mother had called Marcus's wife to complain about me the morning after I declined to help, that the house had actually been in foreclosure proceedings for 6 months before they reached out to me. He told me that the night they put me out, he had cried in his room and hadn't known what to do because he was 14 and she was his big sister, and nobody explained to him that what had just happened was not normal. I hadn't known, he cried. I had always assumed he didn't fully understand what was happening. Hearing it 15 years later, I had to set my phone down for a moment and look at my ceiling. We are not fixed, Marcus and I. You don't fix 15 years in one phone call, but we are something now that we weren't before, which is honest with each other. And that is more than I expected from any of this. My parents did not contact me directly after the post. My mother sent a message through my cousin, the same cousin who had called that Tuesday morning saying she hoped I was proud of myself. I did not respond. My father apparently told people at church that I had always been difficult and that some children are simply born ungrateful, which I was told secondhand, and which landed exactly as much weight on me as a weather report from a city I don't live in. The house sold at foreclosure auction in May. Marcus sent me a photo without comment. I looked at it for a long time. It was smaller than I remembered. The oak tree in the front yard was still there. Enormous now. The kind of tree that just keeps growing regardless of everything happening around it. I remember climbing that tree when I was 8. I remember my mother watching from the porch and smiling. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel vindicated. I felt the particular kind of tired that comes after something has finally, fully ended, the kind of tired that is almost indistinguishable from peace. That evening I called Ruth. She's 63 now, and still in Chicago, still feeding people who need it, still picking up the phone in 11 minutes when someone needs her. I told her everything that had happened over the past few months. She listened the way she always listened, which is completely, without filling the silence with her own opinions until you're done. When I finished, she said, "Baby, I am so proud of you. Not because I had won anything. Not because my parents had lost. But because I had stopped carrying something that was never mine to carry in the first place. I am 32 years old. I have an apartment in Seattle with real furniture and a cat named Douglas, and a career I built from a scholarship application I filled out alone at Ruth's kitchen table when I was 17. I have Marcus, cautiously, carefully, the way you hold something fragile that you're not sure yet can support its own weight. I have Ruth, who has been more family to me than family ever managed to be. My parents' number is still in my phone. I have not called it. I have not blocked it either, which I've thought about and can't fully explain, except to say that blocking it felt like it required something from me that I'm not ready to give, which is a final decision about how much space they take up. Right now they take up very little. A contact entry. A folder of screenshots I hope I never need. A memory of a garbage bag and a January night, and a woman named Ruth who showed up with her coat half-buttoned. I don't need them to apologize. I stopped waiting for that a long time ago. What I needed was to stop letting the shape of their choices define the shape of my life. And I have done that, slowly and imperfectly, and without anyone's permission. That is enough. That is more than enough. If you're watching this, and you've been made to feel like choosing yourself is the same as abandoning your family, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not responsible for managing the consequences of other people's choices. You are not ungrateful for refusing to fund the dysfunction that hurt you. You are not cold for setting a boundary that protects the life you built. Walking away isn't the end of a story. Sometimes it's the only way the story gets to have a good one. Drop a 1 in the comments if any part of this hit close to home. And if you've been through something like this, your version of the garbage bag, your version of January, tell me about it. I want to know. I'll see you in the next one.